Go, go, go.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us for our finally July discussion of Unwieldy Creatures for the Interstellar Book Club. It was a long time coming, but we made it happen. We're here. Sadly, Max is not here, but we are here. So, my lovely guests, please introduce yourselves for my dead fans.
Tina, you go first.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Tina. I'm from Sound Free Book Reviews. I like to read books. I forgot how to do these things. I forgot. My mind just went blank.
We're in the same place.
I figured I was in a good spot.
Great. My name is Steph. I'm from Coffee Over Apples. I also read books. Who would have thunk?
Hi, Scylla.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us. And preemptively, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But all right. So, summary of Unwieldy Creatures. I'm going to try to give one. So, this is a retelling of Frankenstein, but it's in a not so distant future where Dr. Frank is like doing research on like fertility and trying to create a human embryo by using genetic material that's not necessarily an egg and sperm. And of course, shenanigans happen because it's a retelling of Frankenstein and things cannot go according to plan. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a retelling of Frankenstein.
Shenanigans. It's like murder. Shenanigans.
Yeah. Shenanigans. Chaos ensues. Chaos ensues. I'm sorry, Scylla. I need to warn you. I need to warn you. Just know I feel very, very, very bad.
There will be criticism.
Yeah. So, do we want to start by sharing our star ratings of the book?
Accuracy. It is shenanigans.
Also just shenanigans, but add more depression. Yeah. Shenanigans with a heavy cloak of Frankenstein is very depressed.
Yeah.
Which I don't think can be said about Z in here. I don't. That particular thing, no.
We'll get to those things.
Yeah.
There's some interesting diversions from the source material. But...
Tina, why don't you go first?
I struggle with this because I really enjoyed like the first half because I thought the kind of lead up, the kind of backstory of the characters was really interesting. I liked that. I thought that was different from like Frankenstein because we don't really get that too much. I thought the writing was really well done. Like I thought the prose was really good. I guess I would give it like a 3.5 because I had some issues with the last third, particularly in terms of like logic and also the likability and like kind of I don't know. I was struggling because I don't know. I don't think it's a bad book. There were certain things about it that I was just like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'd like to see if that changes after I talk to you guys. So that's I'm known for giving very nice reviews, I would say. So
Tina, you said exactly what I think, but I'm more inclined to rage. But still, I gave 3 stars. Still like what nice, and I was like, okay, 3 stars. But all the exact things, like that portion in the end, it started really good. The prose was great, but then I felt fury, and I was like, I can't in good conscience give this more than 3 stars when I'm actually livid.
I feel like the more we talk about this, the more you get upset.
That's why I was like, I can't miss this one. It's gonna be fun. It's almost more fun to talk about books when people don't like them than it is when people love them.
Well, I think I'm gonna be a weirdo and be in the middle at 3.25.
graph around here.
Like I have a feeling we're all gonna have the same criticisms or very similar criticisms to give. But when I say that, like, I was so sucked in the beginning, I was here for it, right? And then even after, like, there's this one thing that happens, I feel like it's like a third of the way through the book, which we'll talk about. But when I put that to the side, I was like, I'm still invested. And I like the commentary, and I like the writing, I like everything about it. It was that thing at the third mark and then the ending, and we'll talk about it.
I also need to highlight, yes,
Yes.
that's indeed raise the ratings to the fullest ability.
Yes.
Couldn't be me, but at most I do 0.5 at most.
I do. And also I have gotten into the habit, because I'm just like, I love Storygraph's rating system. When I rate the same book on Goodreads, I'll put in my review like 3.25 rounded up or rounded down or whatever.
I mean, I do tend to do, like, if I enjoyed it more, then it's 4, even if it's a 3.5. It could also go to 3 if it was less enjoyment, but it was still a 3.5. So I go off of vibes.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard sometimes. You're like, well, I don't know. This shouldn't really be like a 4 or 3.
Yes. All right. So let's start with like non-spoilery thoughts, which I think the main thing most of us will probably be in agreement was like the prose itself was engaging, which that's how I felt. Like, even though I had a similar issue to what I have with the original, which is that I think it's slow and I'm like, can we get going? At least I found the writing style here a lot more pleasant than in the original Frankenstein by Mary Shelley.
I thought the writer did a great job in making what was very much like a Bildungsroman, you know, like the kind of info dumpy, here's me as a baby and here's me growing up my entire life, like step by step, making that like engaging, because sometimes that can be kind of like boring. But I was like, oh, I see how the father like is doing this or why this is happening. It was kind of interesting to kind of, I haven't read a book like that in like a long time. It seems like books now kind of do the backstory in like little snippets here and there, where this was like, no, here's the backstory chronologically. And I kind of liked that. It kind of felt almost historical fiction-y, even though it was set like in the modern times, which was cool.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. I was so invested in their story, and I feel like it was so integral to have that. Like, I think after a while, because I feel like that first part, it did take a big chunk of the beginning. And after a while, I kind of forgot that this was a Frankenstein retelling, because I was like, oh yeah, we're going to get to that at some point. But I was just so invested in Z's like trauma and everything that led up to them, you know, everything that led to the Frankenstein part of it. And I feel like it was really important. Like, I feel like we can't take that part out and the story will still be the same, because of the way that it framed who Z is and the choices that they made. Like, it was important to maybe, I don't know if empathize is the right word necessarily, but like, it's just when you see someone make their choices, sometimes you wonder why, and this just gave it all to you.
Yeah. I did find that helpful. I'm like, yes, I do want all this lore about her before all the chaos happens.
Yeah.
And it was heartbreaking at times too, like the thing with the brother, how the father like pretty much destroyed something about the brother. I just realized I was going into spoilers a little bit, but like, you know what I mean. I'm so bad at this, but that part, like all the little things, the smaller things that happen that a book might not have touched upon if it was written in a different way, was like presented here in a way that made you think that, oh, this is why Z makes these choices later on, because of this thing had like a, what's that thing from Inside Out? It's like a core memory.
Yeah.
If you guys have seen it. Sorry, I reference kids' movies a lot because
I watch it for enjoyment, so I know.
Okay.
But actually, what Scylla saying here, like, yes, I did notice the direct quotes from Frankenstein, but no, I did not like it.
I noticed one.
There were a few. I read it physically, and I'm pretty sure it was like maybe even in italics or something. I think there was some distinction made when it was pulled directly from Frankenstein, and I was like, I don't think it melds well. I'm like, we can just use other words to express the same thing, but that's how nitpicky I am. I'm like, no, no. Plus, to me, it doesn't make sense with Frankenstein exists in here. And I don't think when those quotes are said, it's meant to be like, I know I'm quoting Frankenstein right now. It's just, no, you have to, this is just my speech. This is just an original thought I'm saying. And I'm like, you're not, though. You're
You
not.
should have used it as epigraphs instead of each chapter. Like have quotes at the start of the chapters that like thematically tie in with the chapter. That would have been less more immersive, I guess, than all of a sudden breaking into like 1870s speech.
Well, I didn't recognize it at all because I haven't read Frankenstein in like 20 years, so I don't remember
I read it
anything.
last summer, so I was like, okay, this is good. I can remember some stuff.
I haven't read it in a few years, but again, I still had the visual cues. Like I can't remember anymore how exactly, but I'm like, it shows you when it's quoting directly from Frankenstein. I'm like,
that seems like it shouldn't really. You should know or not know. It should be. It's like when you make an allusion or a reference to something. If someone doesn't know it, it should be fine. Like it should still make sense. And then if someone does pick on it, they do. Versus like being like, "This is from the book."
yeah,
It'd be like having a quote, a pop culture reference, and then having like a footnote saying, "This is from Star Wars" or something.
Yeah. But I don't know. See, the thing is, I don't give Z any credit because I can't stand it. This is what it boils down to. I have beef with Z. So I'm like, no, I don't think you're using this being conscious, because if you did, then spoilery things, why on earth would they even happen?
You know, I might actually buy it that they did, because it's like just because people are aware of something doesn't mean that they necessarily fully understand the ramifications of what they're using, right? And I feel like that's going to tie into this when we get into the spoilery section, is like, because Frankenstein exists in this world and that it's directly quoted and that it's an important piece of literature referenced by one of the main characters, you would think that someone who has spent so much time around this understands it to its core. But just because, like, if words could actually be that transparent, then we wouldn't have a lot of problems that we have, right? But it's like they read this thing and they took out of it what they wanted to get out of it and like totally missed the forest for the trees.
See,
he's like, ooh, building bodies. I love this.
I can understand that, but I cannot accept it. That's my thing. I know people are like this or can be like this, but it infuriates me. I feel it. That's the thing. Like, that's what it boils down to for me. I'm like, not you being so smart and so nothing up here. No. No.
Full intelligence, low wisdom.
I can't deal with that. I cannot. No, absolutely not.
Okay. Is there any other non-spoilery things that we can say?
I think the most interesting stuff does happen in the spoilers.
Probably.
Should we give trigger warnings?
Take it away. I read this already a while ago.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to start.
Calling people with a physical disability creatures.
Yeah, Frankenstein is a like sci-fi horror, so everything that goes along with that. But I think also because this takes place in a more contemporary time period, there we have characters of different representations. So there is like harmful things against a trans character. There is, I guess, I don't know if manipulation is one, but like,
I mean, there's like
parental abuse.
yeah,
parental abuse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
Homophobia.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misgendering.
Yes, a lot of misgendering. Yep.
There's death in childbirth, which can be triggering to people.
Yep. Horrific accounts of women's health care. I guess we'll just
yeah, it's true. It's like
that midwife. She tried. That midwife tried. She tried so hard.
So yeah, be conscious.
I think those are the big ones. All right, let's go into spoilers.
Take it away. I want to see if yours is the same as mine. If I have to build on it, or if I can just be like, "This is my thing that I didn't like."
It's
different.
What the true seed of it begins with Z allowing her own experiment to be nulled. Like, she has a hypothesis. Her whole thing is, I want to create human life, no sperm, no egg. I'm going to create basically the equivalent of that without actually using either of those things. And so her amazing brother, with all his trauma, decides, I'm going to inseminate the egg that my sister made with my sperm. And Z decides, you know what? I'm too impatient. I'm putting that in my girlfriend. Let's go. Let's give it a shot.
Do you think he like used a medical procedure, or do you think he just kind of like went over it? That's what I kind of pictured.
That's how I pictured it.
I did not want to.
So here's the thought, right? Here's the thought. Let's just say, let's put Z's logic of, I went through all this trouble to make this egg to just let the experiment be null and void. Let's put that to the side for a second. When he did that, did he really think she wasn't gonna know? Like, she just showed up at the office and the egg was fertilized, like, bitch, where?
I don't know as much that he thought she wouldn't know. I think, honestly, actually, that was part of like the insult of it. Like, I don't think he thought as much that she would like accidentally
use it,
the girlfriend, but he wanted to be like, well, fuck you, deal with that shit.
I ruined your experiment.
Yeah. And
what a length to go.
And
didn't he wasn't his goal though to marry her?
Yeah.
Do you think this is gonna work? He's like, oh, if I do this, she'll be so mad at me that she'll be like, yeah, okay, let's do it. Like, I don't understand his motivation. I'm like, what is his plan here? Or was he? Oh no, he was mad. She'd already said no like a million times.
Yeah.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was revenge.
So the big question is, why did she use it? Why didn't she just say, screw that, dispose of it, and then start the experiment over? Or like have multiple backup.
Like seems weird she'd only have one.
That's the part that doesn't make sense to me. That's the biggest thing that like I can't accept, because she's like, this is my whole life. Like, my whole life and career is the culmination of this experiment. So one, why wouldn't she have multiples of her own like created egg? And I don't get it. I'm like, her whole thing, like literally her whole research, she wrote at least one book all about like, we don't need sperm for human life. Screw that shit. I'm like, if I'm in that mind, like I put myself in that mind where I'm so obsessed with this, and I literally spend months to make this happen, no way in hell is one of the things contaminated, and I'm like, you know what? Gonna use it anyway. Doesn't matter. I'm like, no, no, no.
Like
Especially
there has
as
to have been other trials. Sorry, there are other trials they obviously did. Like she obviously did before that failed. So why was
Right.
this any different? Sorry, just
Right. Like the point at the end of the day is the whole point was no male sperm from a natural tree source, and it's here. So like that's the point, right? That at the end of the day.
See, but Scylla, you know, I get this, that like, well, at least part of the experiment is still the thing because she formed her cells into an egg. So at least half of it. But that was not her main goal. That was never her main goal. Her main goal was never, oh, let me make it so only half of the genetic material is like the typical type, and the other is this thing that I create. That was never her actual goal. If that had been part of what she was building up to, cool, no problem. It's fine. V's a literal man hater. Literally.
Yes.
Like there's no sugarcoating that. She was a literal man hater. If I'm a man hater, again, no way in hell, if my whole thing is I don't want to deal with sperm, because that's the main thing she even talked about. It wasn't even like the egg. She mostly was focused on the sperm itself. I'm like, if I'm such a hater of men and I don't even want sperm, it would never satisfy me for it to be that, well, I created my egg, but now it got fertilized with sperm. No.
It's like trying to make a vegan cake and someone puts an egg in it and you're like, it's fine, it's mostly vegan. Like the experiment's useless.
Right. And it's like to the point where she had that conversation with her professor in a previous chapter before she had her lab established and everything. And it's like she is a man hater, understandable, all the trauma that she's had, and she needs to go to therapy and all these things. And a male professor, while I can understand at her mindset at that time wanting to ignore him because of the messenger and not the message, but his message was be careful of the ethics of what you're doing, put consideration into it. And it's like, okay, so if she's going to cast ethics aside and go full ham on the pure science of it and the goal being the goal, why half-ass the goal?
That just doesn't make any sense to me. And like, I know, Scylla, you're trying so hard to be like devil's advocate or like the other thing. No. You know,
maybe Scylla on here.
Maybe. I'm like, I can't. I'm like, I can actually see myself.
You know what I can see?
I can't. No.
Okay. Here's where this makes sense to me, like this of just being curious and wanting to see what would happen if there was another surrogate, not Hannah, right? Another surrogate who is not like the golden egg, the golden goose that will lay the golden egg, right? But rather another person that could be part of this experiment as like a B plot experiment, right? Then I could see that satisfying a curiosity. But to throw all the literal eggs in one literal basket,
no.
I was like, why?
I still don't understand why Hannah went along with any of this, but I guess she was so like emotionally manipulated that she's just like, yeah, it's cool. I'm fine with this. This incest baby. I guess it's not really because they're different. They weren't actually brother and sister.
Genetically, it's not it.
Genetically, okay. Genetically, it's fine.
Yeah.
But how do they both have the gigantism gene? Like that's a very random like thing for them both to have.
Yeah. No, and that's
also that part annoyed me.
No. Steph and I talked about that as well. We're like, why did it have to be that, well, she happened to have the gene for that and he happened to have it? Like, there still could have been a ruined experiment without having sperm at all in here.
It could have been like her manipulating genes. Like she could have been like, I'm manipulating this baby to make them stronger and smarter, but then the baby comes out kind of like like Frankensteinish, and I'm trying to say it nicely. And that would make more sense to me than like that aspect. And also like gigantism doesn't show up in the womb. It doesn't show up in a baby and a toddler. It's later in life. So I was like, this isn't even correct. They just picked a random genetic problem and put it in the book. Like they could have been like, it could have been anything.
Yeah. And I think I'm pretty sure like it's implied in there at some point that she didn't even actually check for these kinds of things in the genetics. And I'm like, what do you mean?
You made this thing from scratch.
Yes. And like, especially when she's so obsessed with, like, she has even this daydream of like basically the perfect human that she could create, who is in essence basically neither really man nor woman. It's a very like non-binary thing, which I have thoughts about that as well, but pin in that. But if you were daydreaming about this perfect human creature, what do you mean you're not testing your genetics for all the possible things that could combine with other things to create things you don't want in this child?
Like, already at the point now where people can, like rich people can strip out things they don't want. So like, why isn't this already in practice? Like, why isn't she doing this? Like, what?
I couldn't get it.
It felt very forced. I think that was my thing. I'm like, this feels like it's trying so hard to get to the Frankenstein part. It just were like, well, you know what? This kind of makes sense. I don't know. That's how it felt to me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that it's lazy. It just feels like it wasn't. I don't know. I have trouble kind of parsing what it is.
Yeah, it felt like a kink in the road, because again, the beginning was so strong, right?
Yeah.
And even after that part, like there were sections where I was like, this is still strong. Like we'll get to Ash and we'll get to all that in a little bit, but it was that part that was like put the brakes on for me, and I was like, wait a second, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
it took a lot of steam out of the book for me.
Yeah, I felt like too many things. Doggy. The author ended up being like, wait, this is a retelling. I need to bring these plot points, even if it's in my own kind of interpretation, in here. And I'm like, you can deviate. It's okay. It's okay, because then that's part of where my rage ended up being, that I'm like, so all these things happen, and your thesis is all around like, I love Frankenstein, and you're like, I didn't see any of this coming.
I love Frankenstein.
I mean, some people are that dense. Some people are that
and I refuse to accept it, or at least to engage with those people. That's why it pisses me off. I'm like, I can't do it. I can't do it because this type of person pisses me off. Live it. No.
Oh, it's so funny. Okay, so is that scene settled? We're moving on to the next, a different section,
I guess.
You could do a whole other video about it.
Z looking at Frankenstein's story like, this tale can't stop me because I can't read. Forget signs. I can't read. Like, what? Really? No. Livid. That's what I am.
Can we talk about, I haven't really had time to mull over Lee, so I want to use this time to hear what your interpretations or what your feelings were around Lee's arc.
I'm trying to remember. I was so distracted by like everything else that happened. I was like, oh yeah, this other surrogate lady or person.
That's kind of how I feel as well. I'm like, they were there. Indeed, they actually matter a lot in the second part.
Yeah.
But I was just, everything was overcast by my hatred of Z. So those are my thoughts. My thoughts is Z is evil. Lee had to deal with all that shit. They shouldn't have had to. But
okay, so I really liked Lee. And you know, for a minute when we were getting to the part where Lee was making choices, and I was like, come on, don't do that. No, bad move. Like, but I understood where she was coming from. And again, this goes back to, I think there was really good buildup with Lee's backstory too, where the decisions that she was making were coming from a place of just hurt and like unresolved feelings. So it didn't really bother me at all once, because by the time that storyline kind of came in, we were well into the Frankenstein retelling part being at like the forefront, you know? So it didn't really bother me that much. I really felt for her.
I think I'm trying to remember things because again, it's been read at this point. I think a lot of it for me was that the second half of the book I felt like did a severe disservice to the narrative, especially because we were so slowed down and taking our time in part one, which we had some of Lee there. Like it wasn't like they're not there, but the second part was really where Lee was more of the focus, and we were just zooming by things. Like everything was happening at the speed of light. Finally, Z had asked, like, okay, be the surrogate. And they do that. They develop this weird, toxic relationship dynamic thing, heavily based on Z being a manipulative asshole. And then the person Lee had been in love with sweeps in, saves the day, and that's that.
That's the other part, but I'm trying to sandwich this with positivity in the middle.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with what you guys were saying, but is Lee supposed to be like the guy on the ship from the original Frankenstein? Because the Frankenstein has like 3 or 4 stories in one, right? Because they're listening to the story being told.
Arguably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was
that's
curious. I'm
what
like, am I reading too much into this?
No, you're not. You're not.
Sorry, that had nothing to. I was like, I gotta ask this before I forget.
Yes, we have confirmation here, so it's like correct.
I don't even
Thank
remember
you.
all that. And be so honest, I need to reread Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Like there's a ship.
Yes, the ship Frankenstein is basically dying on.
Yeah, and he runs away.
That's where his on his dying breath, he's telling. I didn't remember the name, Walton. Like, well, this is all the shit that happened to me, and that monster out there. This is all the things that led to that monster.
Okay. Speaking of which, I think I said this to Natalie before, but like the scene where Ash comes in and Z confronts Ash, is like, it's been 16 years. And then Ash starts telling, like, leading them back to tell the story and everything. I just wanted a mic drop of the only thing Ash said and be like, Mom? And like throw some guilt on it. Like make her feel what she's done. Because logic is not going to get through to her.
I agree. That's been so funny. I have thoughts about Ash's actions and how they don't really jive with the original idea of Frankenstein.
Go for it.
Ash in the story. So, well, first of all, this is a minor thing. So this unhoused guy finds this like brand new baby, like an hour-old baby, and is like, I can keep this baby alive. I have no colostrum for the baby, which is like the initial breast milk that you need for most babies. I have no formula. Formula is very expensive. How did he keep this baby alive in the woods in like the winter? I just don't understand.
I read somewhere, and I think I read this because I was into like medieval books at some point. Don't ask me why. This was a time in Steph lore that we're not going to address. The point is that when like monasteries would be given children that were left at the doorstep for them to take care of, they would usually feed them like goat's milk or something like that. Like I think it might be goat, but there's like a certain kind of milk that they would use to simulate.
Okay. I was like, where is he getting all this?
Yeah.
Thank you. I was like, no, I'm like so concerned about this. I was like, how did he get this baby alive? Anyway, so raises the baby, gets the baby tons of books, like critical theory books that somehow the public library has, teaches the baby all of this stuff. The baby grows up with a moral compass, a person teaches them right from wrong. But somehow Ash is convinced that he has to murder a child, a toddler, in revenge. I'm like, but that doesn't... The idea with Frankenstein, the original one, was that he was literally made and he had no moral compass whatsoever, no one to teach him right from wrong. And that's why he went on his like killing spree, because he didn't know right from wrong. It was like an idea about ethics and whether there's any natural ethics, right? That was kind of the idea. This seemed to like negate all that because Ash had a moral compass, someone who was a good person that taught him right from wrong, or them right from wrong, but then they just completely forgot about that. And I found that really kind of confusing, and I was hoping to like work through that with you guys, because I was like, how does that make any sense? Like, and at the end, they're hanging out with him, this child murderer. Like, in the end, don't they mention that Lee and then they like hang out with Ash? And I was like, I wouldn't let this child murderer in my house.
We'll get to that.
I'm sorry. I just had such many problems with this.
All right, Scylla goes back to the thing about food and whatever. So some connection to the outside world, like hospitals. But yeah, how did that child survive? Truly.
So I agree that part. I thought those thoughts, and then my brain just went, you know what? This is Z's child. Critical thinking is
the brother too, actually.
Yeah. I just allowed it to be. I was like, well, let's continue with the suspension of disbelief and just be like, they were just livid, and so they killed a child. Let's move on.
I feel like
I was just like, what?
Yeah, I feel like it was, for me, I thought of it as just mirroring Z's experience of like, you've gone through horrible things, you know better, you have access to literature, which is a metaphor for morality and like telling you what the right thing to potentially ponder over is, but that doesn't necessarily stop someone from doing the wrong thing because emotions.
And yes, Scylla, yes, I give Ash suspension of disbelief and be like, okay, deserve some slack a little bit. Because at the end of the day, that's also the same thing I did in the original Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein can kick rocks. I don't give a shit about that man and his little pity party that he threw himself his whole freaking life since he started making his experiment. The one I gave a shit about was the monster. I'm like, the monster was slighted, abandoned, and all this shit. And yeah, he murdered people. That's what happened.
I feel bad for the poor people that got murdered that had nothing to do with it. That's why I was like, this poor innocent kid, this poor innocent woman who like, oh, there's another trigger warning, who kills herself over this. Like, I'm like, these people had nothing to do with it. So I just found the fact that like that Ash went after these innocent people kind of like made me really not like them very much. And I have no sympathy for them anymore. I felt bad for their situation, but same thing with Z. Like, you're saying that you don't feel sympathy for Z after the stuff that they went through, but I don't feel sympathy for Ash because they aren't like a blank slate thrown into the world. They had 16 years of a role model to at least contemplate. Like, maybe murder the brother.
That was the only thing, though. That was the main thing. That was like, why would you kill the kid when you can kill the brother? There's such a more enticing one right there. I'm like, go ahead, kill your dad. Let's go.
I wouldn't have cared about that. I'm like, this poor, I get like all upset too when kids die in books. And I was like, but that happened in the original Frankenstein. So I'm like, obviously it had to happen. That's kind of why I felt like it was shooting a bit. I was like, okay, so of course he's going to go after that. As soon as it was like, oh, the brother's married, I'm like, oh, well, I know what's going to happen now. Better brace myself.
Sharing a bunch of stuff that I'm like, yes, hard agree. Like in the original picture, pathetic. He's whiny. And he should get called out. He's worth nothing. He's worth nothing. And literally, this was him. Like in Justine's here, like, I have it worse because I'm sad. I'm like, don't choke. I'm like, I hope the monster kills you. I hope the monster kills you.
Oh my god.
Well, the reason he was just like disconnected from it. She was kind of like, it's sad. It's sad. That's it.
You didn't care at all.
Really? Mm-mm.
Well, if Ash killed the brother, then that would have been a bonding point for them and Z, because then they could have both bonded over their hatred of men and Ezra.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Tina, I would agree that like it felt shoehorned in like that it had to be a child that got murdered. And I'm like, it didn't. The
Could have
dad
been anybody, really.
brother was right there. Just go to the source.
You should have let Hannah live. Like what it should have been, in my opinion, is that Z gets the baby away, tells Hannah the baby died. Hannah doesn't know. Ash kills Hannah later on. Like Hannah lives for another 15 years. You know, that would have been more hard hitting for Z. Maybe Z even has like a redemption arc where she realizes she's like treated Hannah like shit, and then Hannah gets murdered. That would have been more kind of poetic to me than killing some random relative that Z's never met.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about the ending now? Questions. Someone please elaborate how it was a happy ending. Because like I saw the happy ending and I was like, how did we get here?
I mean, it's a happy ending because everyone is alive and okay. But like, how did not more bad things happen? Listen, I was just ready for the book to be over.
I'm trying to remember what happened. All I remember is something about Ash hanging out with them, and I was like, how?
Okay,
how could you hang out with them,
I do remember, even though I didn't read it. It's been a minute now, but it's basically like, again, Lee's ex-girlfriend is able to swoop in before Lee has given birth, and it's like, we're taking you out of here. We're not gonna deal with that insane woman.
Right, she emails and all. Yeah, okay.
They end up even bringing the midwife that was there for Hannah's birth.
How did they find the contact information of this person?
I think they
see in the stories like, here's the contact if you ever need it.
I think they address it, but I can't remember because small details like that don't matter to me. And so birth is given to the child. I think they move like a couple times to different places. And so the child is just raised by Lee, the partner, and somehow Ash ends up there.
So this is another example of Z being the worst scientist ever. Because like, why was there no kind of like plan to monitor your experiment? Like, what if she just was walking to the grocery store and something happened when she didn't come back? How do you know? Like,
what if she went into labor and had a birth and really died? Like, yeah, like there's so many things that can happen. Like,
right. So it's like from when the partner came and was like, we're out, and then they dipped and they started a new life, and then Ash came and I was just like, what's happening? Where did Z go?
Sila's getting ready.
Please,
getting ready.
Okay, I want to hear
Please help. I'm so confused.
I was checked out really at that point. I was like, sure, okay, well, at least they are no longer around Z, and that's all I care.
Yeah, I clearly made an impression on me, the ending, because I couldn't remember any of it. So. I did listen to it.
You know what? Facts.
Perfect. Yeah, because Frankenstein's also a horrible scientist. Yes. Right. But the difference between Z and Frankenstein is that Z has an actual degree. And Frankenstein never finishes his degree. He's never actually a doctor even. He has an excuse.
He's not?
No.
I don't remember. Why is he called a doctor then?
He's a student still. He hasn't graduated because he becomes obsessed with this part of his research, but he's gotten a degree at that point anyway. He's not actually a doctor.
Z is a horrible scientist, and
he is worse because she actually has a degree.
And I mean, he was working at a time when really he's like, I can sew these body parts together and make a person. Like the science.
Yes. Frankenstein stopped studying after the creature comes to life. Versus Z
did learn his lesson there.
Got her degree before the experiments really took off. So, yes, it's a depression. Mm-hmm. Unconscious for weeks after. Yep. And he does do that sometimes. Yeah. I have beef with Victor Frankenstein. As
People are
can
like,
be.
what fictional character would you like to meet? And Natalie's like, oh, I know who I want to meet because I'm gonna beat the crap out of him.
You got a bone to pick with you.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm still wrapping my head around the ending.
Well, first of all, hi. Thanks for joining us. Okay. The thing I put a pin in that I don't want to abandon because it did bother me. Like, so much of this had like great exploration of like gender identity, and how complicated and all of that it can be. But again, this is why I end up being more of a Z hater at the end of the day, because part of her thing, I don't forget it, even though it's literally only like one paragraph that it's brought up and basically never again. Whereas Z's like, the perfect human is like this blend of both things, whatever. I'm like, you could genetically make everyone be that. That doesn't stop them from ultimately being like, I'm a woman, I'm a man, or I'm actually non-binary or any other gender. So like, you're so upset about like the expectations set on you as a child, having been born female, but then you're also just ultimately trying to impose a different set, a better set of expectations on other humans. Make that make sense.
Well, being able to work through the moral quandary of designer babies would require Z to actually like do some self-exploration and maybe work through the man hate that they have and be like, maybe I should address my daddy issues.
But no, because we can't have nice things.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the book would be over really quickly if they did go to therapy. So
That's true.
I'm not mad at it.
I just need to have an actual real. I wish they did. I'm like, they know so much and yet so little.
Mm-hmm.
She really does know so much and yet so little. I can't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that goes into like someone who devotes themselves so much to their craft, right? Like how Z is done, that they get this kind of tunnel vision. It just kind of highlights why it's important that we have groups of people who work towards making like whatever the policy is, or to quander those ethics around the science that we find and how it's applicable, and that it's not just a free-for-all. I'm also really curious about how, because there was a moment where Z mentioned that they had some notoriety in the hospital, people around town knew them. So I kind of wanted to see if anybody who was aware of what Z was actually cooking came in and was like, hey, we're just going to do a quick check-in, maybe call Dyfus. I don't know. Like, just want to make sure everything's still sound.
Because was Z doing like intro? Like that's what she focused on? Like that's why she's known in the hospitals and stuff? I don't remember. That's why I was asking. Is that why?
I don't remember. I just remember, so maybe this is like something that I missed, but there was when Z had the baby and was leaving the hospital, that they were trying to, I guess, not pay attention or like avoid really being noticed or stopped as they were leaving, because a lot of people would know who they were. But I don't.
That's why I wonder if they were maybe like some kind of a fertility specialist who went to the hospital a lot for like tests or like that kind of thing. Because it makes sense with what they were doing in the labs, you know, dealing with embryos and stuff. So maybe that was like their side project was the project, and then they did this to probably make money too, because it's a
I mean, I know her lab, there was like the private section of it that was basically like, no, only I'm allowed here. And that's how we end up with the shenanigans of like, it's an incompetent security guard that allows the brother to go in and then fertilize the egg. So I think what's implied, or maybe even stated, but I don't pay attention to the smaller details, is that like there's other research being done in that lab. This is just her little private thing. But yeah,
Makes sense.
Scylla's like, yes, big figure.
Okay, it was IVF.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I figured, because yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I saw it as much as like that she maybe worked directly in doing it, as much as like her big thing is like doing research around IVF and other things we can do with IVF versus actually doing procedures on the daily or semi-regularly.
Yeah. Like I meant like maybe like they had patients in the hospital that had used her techniques and they were making sure that the pregnancies were viable and stuff, and maybe she had such success that the doctors like knew who she was. I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. I think ultimately
Yeah.
she was trying to keep hidden the more specific things of what actually
for sure
in her research. So
Any other thoughts?
I don't think so.
Not really.
Should we talk about what we're going to read next month?
Yeah.
Okay. I have the book too, and I left it in the other room. Hold on.
It's basically it's called Orbital. I can't remember the author.
Samantha something.
And it's like one day of like a space orbit on a space station. And so it's these 6 astronauts. We're counting. It's kind of like I've started listening to it on Audible, so that's why I know what it is. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's very stream of consciousness, very much like following like the path of the orbit around the Earth, watching like typhoons come in and like daylight hit, because I guess daylight hits like 16 times. And like, but then it's also the astronauts' kind of little backstories and stream of consciousness thoughts about things. It's very poetic. I really like it so far, actually.
Okay, nice.
That doesn't really help.
I think that sells it.
You gave a vibe.
Novella.
Yes, you did give
Short.
a vibe. Can I also just say I did appreciate this month that we read something that wasn't in space. I feel like a lot of the books we read are set in space. I was like, oh yeah, it's a sci-fi.
Yeah, we should try to find more non-spaces.
Be fun.
And she's talking about Orbital specifically. I think maybe. I hope so.
It was.
Yeah.
So, should I still read the synopsis for anybody who's interested?
Yeah.
Okay. So so by Samantha Harvey, a slender novel of epic power, Orbital deftly snapshots one day in the lives of 6 women and men hurtling through space, not towards the moon or the vast unknown, but around our planet. Selected for one of the last space station missions of its kind before the program is dismantled, these astronauts and cosmonauts from America, Russia, Italy, Britain, and Japan have left their lives behind to travel at a speed over 16,000 miles an hour as the Earth reels below. We glimpse moments of their earthly lives through brief communications with family, their photos, and talismans. We watch them whip up dehydrated meals, float in gravity-free sleep, and exercise in regimented routines that prevent atrophying muscles. We witness them from bonds that will stand between them and utter solitude. Most of all, we are with them as they behold and record their silent blue planet. Their exercises of 16 sunrises and sunsets and the bright blinking constellations of the galaxy are at once breathtakingly awesome and surprisingly intimate. So are the marks of civilization far below and crested on the planet on which we live. And it's also very short. So
it's very much a like Earth is Beautiful book, at least from what I've heard so far.
Does that mean it's going to be cozy? Or am I taking that?
It has a bit of cozy so far. I don't know about the ending, but I've only been a third of the way in.
Cool.
So where my dog keeps wandering around and crashing into things and making noises and whining. I don't know what his problem is. He doesn't know why I'm in here during the day. He's like, why are you in here? It's not work time.
I've been watching him the whole time. I'm like, yes, dog. Amazing.
His name's Ruger.
Ruger. Cute.
Yes, you said your name.
But
Not sure what's going on. I don't know what he's doing.
But yeah,
cool.
that's everything. And like Scylla said, yes, I'm done ranting about Z, so nothing else to say. We can just meet again for the next live show discussion.
Woo! Yay! Thanks for coming, everybody.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Our next live show is probably aiming for the still end of this month. Hopefully, we will confirm. So sometime maybe in 2 weeks.
All right, everyone. Thanks for joining.